I know, that's why I like really try to get across to people, like, so when you're buying, if you buy like the bigger can of olive oil, like that's
Uh-huh.
literally an entire tree you just bought.
Hey there, and welcome to the Evolving Ageless podcast. I'm your host, Michelle Drylick, and I am on a mission to change the way women age. In fact, we call this podcast the Enlightened Women's Antidote to Aging, because each week I'm joined by experts in their field that are helping us, in some small way, live a little bit more ageless. So this week is pretty cool. I've had an epiphany over the last few hours in talking a little bit more to my guest today. My guest is Tony Kasandrinos, who is from Kasandrinos Olive Oil in Greece. And the reason why Tony is here with us today, first of all, I know I'm a foodie. And I know many of you guys are foodies as well. But on top of that, I am a nutrition freak, right? As a nutritionist, I've spent so much of my life digging in deep in the clinical research and understanding the health benefits of food. And Tony is here today to really break down the health profile of olive oil for us because, there's been so many debates. We've been fat free, we've been low fat, and fat has been the enemy in America for decades. And we finally have come around and we understand that fat is good for us. Good fat is good for us. And I'm going to welcome Tony to Evolving Ageless. Hey, Tony, how are you?
I'm doing great. Thanks for having me.
You bet. I'm so glad you could be here
Mhm.
because, like I said, I am such a foodie, and there's so many, what I've learned, there are just so many myths around the kinds of oils you use
Mhm.
and where they come from. And as always, don't worry, I've got my own set of research that I'd love to share
Mhm.
in combing through the literature. So here's what I want to know. Tony, tell us a little bit about, I know you like grew up in New York,
Mhm.
but your family has olive orchards in Greece.
Yes.
And so describe the difference in growing up in America with your many, many trips to Greece throughout your childhood.
Okay. Well, it started when I was about a year old. My father's first generation Greek. He came over in the mid 70s when a lot of Greeks did. And most of his family still stayed in Greece. So we had very close ties, and we were there every year at a minimum of 3 to 4 months a year. When I was really little, before I went to school, probably about 6 months a year. So I got to really see the differences between America and Greece. Um, Growing up there, and we touched on this a little bit before, food is a central part of, and anybody who's been to Greece knows, like lunch and dinner are really long process.
Yeah.
Um, Dinner generally doesn't start till about maybe 9 or 10 p.m. and it will very often go till about 2 a.m. with
Mm.
everybody sitting around the table. Kind of the same thing for lunch. We do a siesta usually in the summertime, and lunch is a big meal. It's actually it's bigger than dinner, and everybody has a huge meal at lunchtime, and then goes and takes a nap, and then goes back to work later in the day. But yeah, everything is very food focused. In fact, going back now, that's my outside of the beach. That's my favorite thing is the food.
The food. Yeah,
Hmm.
and family focused, I would imagine, right?
Definitely,
I've
yeah.
always growing up, we have several family friends that are from Greece, and I just
Hmm.
know culturally, like always, when you were invited to dinner at their house, like you said, it was a huge event,
Oh yeah,
and there were tons of people, and you were meeting all these different people and trying to remember
yeah.
names.
Over there, it's really normal. Like I bring a lot of my friends to Greece often. I still go back at least once, if not twice a year, for a few months at a time. And when they see like, oh, we're having lunch, why is there like 18 people here? I'm like, this is just normal. This is what we do. And like what I see in America a lot of times is, and I'm guilty of it too. If I'm just home, just eating in front of the TV or just sitting alone. And over there, that's almost unheard of. Like it's almost unheard of just to have like 2 or 3 or 4 people at a meal. It's usually quite a
It's
few.
like a lonely meal.
Yeah, so it's more of like a gathering, and I think we lose that a lot here in the States or even in the Western world, where you're not as communicate, because that's really the time where you get to talk about what's going on. A lot of debates, but
Yeah, connection though.
yeah,
It's
yeah,
connection. It's where
hmm
people feel valued and important, and they feel secure. So we
definitely.
know, I mean, there's a lot of clinical research on the value of healing in community. There's a book called The Blue Zones
hmm
that Greece is featured in there, right?
It
We
is.
know that when people have community and they have family and they eat well, they
hmm
live longer, and they live healthier longer. I think
Oh,
that's the
definitely,
important part. Like
definitely,
extending life is one thing, but quality of life is a whole different ballgame, right? And so
for
that's what I
sure.
think of when I think of Greece. And I love how you told me that story about hiking.
Yeah,
That's a good one.
yeah.
So
No, I mean,
let's share with us.
no, definitely. So my father and actually most of my cousins and uncles and aunts, we consider second cousins. Like my father's first cousins are actually my aunts and uncles. So
Right.
I have a lot of them. Most of them from that generation have like 9, 12 siblings. So they've always been a big part of our life. And even as I'm 41 now, they're all in their 90s. Some are over 100. And so watching them growing up, I just thought it was normal for like 70, 80, 90-year olds to just be very active all day long. We come from a mountain village, and they have been walking their whole lives and walking up and down mountains. And because I remember when I was a little kid, there was like 3 cars in our village. Everybody else was using their feet or donkeys, or
Wow.
little mopeds. But so it's just a much more active lifestyle, and that doesn't just go for younger people. Like, it's not uncommon. I mean, we'll probably touch on this later, but when we harvest olives, it's not uncommon to see 80 and 90-year-olds out there helping us.
Wow.
Actually, got some really good pictures this past harvest season of some of my father's aunts out there hand picking olives all day long with us and just loving every minute of it.
That's incredible. So,
So,
so along with yourself, your
mhm.
sister Effie, your cousin Efrosini, you
Yep.
guys are running the U.S. operations of
hmm
Kasandrinos olive oil,
Yes.
and it sounds like the harvest and the orchards and everything are in the hands of some really capable people over in
Yeah.
Greece.
Yeah, they are.
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah. We have a
that's
big,
awesome.
yeah, it's basically we have all our orchards are between a few different villages. We're talking a few square miles. And the harvesting basically happens for about 4 to 5 months out of the year, once a year. One tree is harvested one time a year, and that's it. And a lot of how well the trees do depends on how you treat them. So it's not a very, we don't use machines. Like, everything's handpicked and really taken
Wow.
care of all year round. And it is an all year process as far as watering the trees and pruning them, and then the harvest season. So
I had no idea. So 4 to 5 months is the length of harvest season. That's
mhm.
almost I mean, that's significant. It's like a
Yeah,
third
yeah,
of a year, almost a half
yeah,
of a year.
yeah. We generally
Wow.
start in October and end in late February.
That's incredible. And so that's the harvest for the year, right? It's almost like wine,
That's
except
it.
you only get one harvest out of it,
That's
right?
it. You get one harvest, and that's it for the year. That's why, like,
So I love that.
things like hailstorms or something that is devastating. It's rough. So yeah,
Ah.
and a lot of people don't realize that, and that's why I try and tell them, when you're buying like a bottle of olive oil, like one tree only makes a few of those.
Wow.
So
So it's funny because in America we've become disconnected from our food. I really believe that. We
oh,
see our food
100%.
in the grocery store. And even when you see a bottle of olive oil on the shelf, you don't think how many trees went into that bottle of olive oil, right? I mean, that's
Exactly.
crazy. So I do want to take a step back though,
Mhm.
because just for the sake of everyone listening, I want to break down oil, right?
Mhm.
Because even if there's some misconceptions, and I know it can be confusing because very often we use terms like omega 3s and omega 6s, and some oils, some fats are good, some fats are bad, right? And so I do want to say what has, saturated fat we know comes from animals, And then monounsaturated, polyunsaturated fats come from plants. And omega-3s tend to come from animals. They come from mostly fish, sardines, and mackerel and salmon and things like that. And they're very anti-inflammatory. And so even in nutrition school, we always learn omega-6s are inflammatory, right? Not anti-inflammatory, but inflammatory. And what's interesting is that olive oil gets lumped into that. And I was always confused, right? Because the other oils that fall into that category, just so that everyone knows the difference here, there's palm oil, soybean oil, canola oil, sunflower oil.
I mean, an olive itself is a fruit, and the olive oil is the juice of the fruit. So it's actually not a vegetable oil, it's a fruit juice. And that's really the best analogy I can give somebody, except it lasts for a long time as opposed to squeezing an orange and having orange juice. That being said, the freshness is still important. But yeah, a lot of times we were talking about this before, people do get confused when you start talking about fats and all the different subfats. So I think it's best just to give them a very simple analogy and say, okay, you have all these seeds, and if you see how canola oil is made and like just there's solvents used, it's just really a mess, honestly. But as opposed to just pressing the juice out of a fruit, it's almost like a common sense test. Like, oh, okay, I see the difference. But
and for me, I think that's a significant difference because olive oil is one of those omega-6s. We put it in that classification, but it's a extremely healthy oil. So, I mean, if you were to do a research, right? When I do research, I type in the question that I have and I put PubMed at the end. And that's how I know I'm going to get lots of literature, a lot of clinical studies and research. And when you do that on olive oil, you literally get hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of pages of clinical studies on olive oil. So, but the one thing that I want to say that's specific to this audience, right, is that there was a study even in 2019 of 3,000 adults over 50, right? And in America, right, you would think, oh, these are the adults that start to get sick. But in Greece, as you mentioned, they're just hitting their prime, right?
Yeah, definitely.
And so in this study, they actually looked at people who used olive oil exclusively versus people who used it sometimes versus people who never used it. And they created what was called a successful aging index. And literally, there is a statistical significance, something extremely meaningful in the research that says that people that use olive oil exclusively have an insanely better, healthier way of aging.
Definitely.
And what was interesting is the curve goes up, up, up. And when they hit 70, it spikes up. So olive oil pays dividends when people get even older. So I just wanted to set the stage for that. There are things like oleic acid and polyphenols. There are different constituents of olive oil that actually help us heal. They actually get in the gears of aging. There are these hallmarks of aging out there that have to do with the way the genes degrade and the way they express themselves as we age. And olive oil is known to actually what we call modulate gene expression. It actually gets in there and changes the way a gene performs. And so that blew my mind. I've always been a huge fan of olive oil. We cook with it, but more importantly, we eat it raw on vegetables and salads and things like that. So I wanted to throw that in there. And I would love to hear, like, let's start at the beginning. And how does an olive become this like fruit juice, this healthy anti-aging fruit juice?
No, definitely. So it's actually a very simple process. It's been happening for thousands of years. There's nothing too new about it. The vast majority of the year with the olive tree is kind of boring. It's a very, very hardy tree. It will live hundreds, if not thousands of years. We actually have some really old olive trees that imagine if they can like tell stories, but so all year long, they basically grow in the sun in the good soil and they're getting watered. Around mid to late October, they're ready to start being harvested. That will last till about February. The process is really, really simple. We literally lay a tarp, and there's different ways of doing this. I'm going to tell you first how we do it, and then how other big companies do it. But we lay a tarp underneath the tree and literally handpick the olives off the tree. The trees aren't that tall, maybe 15 to 20 feet at its highest peak. So we'll get up there and climb and, get all the olives off every branch.
Wait, you'll climb the tree, or you add a ladder to it?
Both. I like to climb. I
it.
climb them. I mean, they're pretty easy trees to climb, actually.
That's great.
The branches come out pretty low, but yeah, generally, like my older relatives, they'll stay at the bottom and get the bottom part, and us younger people will climb up to the top and olives off. And we literally go tree by tree, and we have a continuous, basically like a convoy going. We fill up the bags of olives. We bring them right to the mill, so they're pressed immediately. Because again, this is a fruit, so you don't want to just let it sit around. Usually within an hour. Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. So they're actually picked, and then we bag them, and then we bring them to the mill, and that's where the actual process of turning it into olive oil happens. And it's pretty much the same process that was being used 2,000 years ago, except they used to use big stones, and they would actually like turn them with donkeys. So that was your machine.
Right, they mash them.
Yeah, you basically mash the olive, and then you would get the fruit juice out of it, and that would be your olive oil. Now we basically put them into like it's like a filter, essentially, taking out any leaves that might be, or branches that might be with the olives. So it basically just separates those. The leaves all get turned into goat food. So everything's very sustainable. I mean,
oh, wow.
You don't want to have any waste. Then the olives themselves are just washed to get any dust off them that they collect just from being outside. From there, this is where the real process happens. And a lot of people hear cold pressed and think that they're pressed. They're actually mashed. It goes into a big, basically like a giant barrel, and they're basically just churned very slowly so that it doesn't get hot. And we touched on cold pressed earlier. What cold pressed means is that during the process of turning it from an olive to oil, that the temperature of the pulp of the olive does not go above 80 degrees Fahrenheit, because heat damages olive oil.
Sure.
So you want to keep the temperature low. So this mashing process happens. It takes about an hour to really get, and it looks like kind of like greenish brown baby food,
Right.
like I guess like pea baby food. But so you do that, and you're basically mashing everything: the pit, the skin, and the pulp inside. From there, it goes into basically a separator, and what that does, it'll separate the olive oil from the actual pulp. So then the pulp gets taken out, and that actually gets turned into like little wooden fuel logs that we use to heat homes with. And then
Are you serious?
Yeah,
That's
yeah,
incredible.
Yeah. Every part of the process is, you don't really want to waste anything.
That's amazing.
Yeah, so they get turned into like little bricks, and then they get sold, and people use them to heat their homes in the winter.
Wow.
So then now you have the liquid, but the liquid isn't 100% olive oil yet, because inside of the olive oil, or inside the liquid, you also do have water, just because olives hold water inside them. Then they go into a separator, which separates the olive oil from the water. Okay, so now you have the olive oil, and that we filter to get out any sediment, like if you have orange juice, you filter it so it's like pulp free.
Yeah.
And then from there it gets bottled, and then that's the process. It's very, very simple, straightforward. It's a line that's probably about 100 feet long. It's not really a big, huge thing. And then, so one of how I said, there's a few differences. Like if you see some of these big companies that are doing tons and tons of trees, a lot of times they'll use machines, and these machines basically drive, it's a big tractor that sucks all the olives out of the tree. But the problem with that is you're damaging the fruit during the process. And when you're doing that, you're also beating up the tree. And you really, I mean, these trees are very finicky in how you treat them. You know, they'll withstand weather and they'll withstand really high temperatures, but you don't really want to beat them up. And the whole pruning process is actually a very important piece to it. And that's a timing issue with what the temperature is like, because you don't want to prune it when it's really cold out, because then that'll kind of mess up the growing process. So that's actually an art form in itself.
I have to say, it almost sounds like just the way you described lunch and dinner, right? As being this elaborate, methodical kind of process that's all about nurture and care, right?
Oh, 100%.
It sounds like it's absolute, like it. I have to say, it just sounds like it's culturally throughout everything you do is caring for everything, whether it's family or your orchard or your, I mean, the way you describe it, and I know, you know, inherently we all know mass-produced food, right? But when you describe the way olive oil is made, and we'll go into some of the things to look for, but when you describe it, it just makes me like, it is a whole food. Olive oil is a whole food, but not all olive oil, I would imagine, because like we're talking about, just like grapes, just like coffee, just like any kind of food that is harvested and preserved, I would imagine it's difficult, right? So the one thing that you taught me is, I've always been taught that you want to find cold press or first cold press, and you're like, yeah, that's a buzzword, because I have got some of your olive oil here, which I love, because it's I love that they come in. So this is like a can, like dark. You've told me that I should never see my olive oil, right? So there's a glass bottle that you can see how dark the bottle is. And a can, obviously, light doesn't reach it in a can. And I even love these little pouches. I take these in my purse, because when I go to restaurants, even when you order olive, like oil and vinegar, I love that on my salad. When I order it, I can't get, it's usually canola oil or vegetable oil that they bring to the table. And so I love bringing
a mixture,
because it's one serving and I just pour it on my stuff. So, but I can see here it's different than what I see on the grocery store shelves. And you told me cold press is a buzzword, because I said, hey, Tony, why does this olive oil not say cold press on it? Because everything, and it's organic. So I'm thinking, okay, it's organic, it must be cold press. Why doesn't it say that? And that's when you educated me that cold press is marketing.
That's all we do. We only have one press, and it's only cold pressed. So we actually decided to take it off our bottle, just because we kind of wanted to make our bottle as aesthetically pleasing as possible.
Yeah,
I kind of wanted to take out the fluff. You know, it really is, at the end of the day, it's like a buzzword. And we just felt like it didn't need to be on the bottle. But what you did talk about, the light not being able to be on it, that's actually why we do have the tin cans, and they're BPA food grade tin cans. And the glass, even though it is very dark, as you can see there, even that we recommend people keep it in a cold, dark, or not cold, but
it says it right on the bottle. Store in a cool, dark place.
As much as I love it to sit on people's kitchen counters, I'd rather you keep it inside the cupboard. So
interesting.
Because the light will degrade the olive oil. And we've actually done a few chemical analysis on the same batch of olive oil over the course of a year, and left one out in the light, and nothing crazy, just on a kitchen counter, and then left one in the cabinet, and we tested them, and the one that was left on the counter was degraded a little bit. I mean, it's still good. It just loses some of its polyphenol counts, and its acidity level went up a little bit.
And that's the benefit of it, though, is having polyphenols in it, you know, as many as possible. And I would imagine in a large facility, right? What's the time, like the way you described it, they're picked within an hour, they're mashed and pressed, and they're bottled that day, right? So what's typical, though? Because we don't know any different, right? In America, we just see a wall of olive oil on the shelf.
The biggest problem, and this is really what we try to do, because we're not a big corporation, we're a 3-person team, and we do have, you know, a lot of orchards in Greece, but we kind of looked at the industry and said, okay, what's wrong with it? because the olive oil we're getting at the local grocery store does not taste like the olive oil in Greece or the olive oil we bring for ourselves here. So what's the difference? And the biggest difference, in my opinion, is the age of the olive oil. And that's just due, and that's really to no fault of the actual olive oil companies. It's the age of the olive oil by the time it gets to your kitchen as a consumer.
Got it.
So just due to, getting it over to the States and then getting it on a store shelf, that's a process in itself because it goes to a few different warehouses in that process. And then it sits on a shelf in a grocery store for who knows how long underneath the lights 24/7, and I've gone to grocery stores quite a few times and saw that if there is a harvest or bottling date on there, could be 2 to 3 years old. And I've even found some that are past the best before date on the back. I'm like, why would you be selling this,
Yeah, right. Well, and I think most grocers don't realize that.
They don't.
They just assume they get a shipment, that week.
I mean, they're so busy with so many things. Yeah. That's like the last thing they're concerned with is the age of a bottle of olive oil.
Yeah, right. But it does age, and it's not just about the quality of the food, right? When we think about it, we think, oh, the quality declines. But at the same time, the other side of that is this is a whole food, and we know that olive oil is a healing food. The oleic acid and the polyphenols play a very important role in slowing the aging process. And so it seems to me that the quality of your olive oil matters.
The quality, and a big one is the age, though, because even our olive oil, like if you have it 3 years from now, it's not going to be nearly as good as it's still edible and it's not going to harm you, but all those positive properties have been severely degraded over time.
Yeah.
And that's why we are pretty much direct to consumer, because we control the storage of the olive oil until it gets to your house. And we only sell the current harvest of olive oil. So we're not selling olive oil, from 2 years ago or even a year ago. Everything is like the current harvest, and that's it. So
I love it. The only thing missing is, does your family hug each bottle? It's really the only thing missing.
I wish.
I feel connected to I actually feel so much more connected to the orchard, if you will, or to my food, right? And like I said, I think we are so disconnected from our food. So when I'm looking at an olive oil, right, I've got a bottle of olive oil. And just to be clear, people, when you open your olive oil, how long does it last once it's open? Like how often should
it'll last a few years. We tell people, so we put, if you see on the back of there, we have a 2-year best before date or expiration date. Yeah. And there's no requirement on what date you put. I can put 36 months on there. That being said, I tell people once you open it, you got 6 months.
6 months from when it's open.
Yeah. Yep. That's what we recommend. Will it last longer? Of course. It's not going to go bad.
But oil's rancid. They go right.
It takes a while. It takes a good probably 3 to 4 year range before it will go rancid.
Oh, really?
Yeah, It'll take a while, but there's other factors, like was the cap tightened all the way? Was it in warm temperatures or cool temperatures? So there's a lot of other factors. That being said, you really want to consume it as quickly as possible. That's why I tell our customers, you're better off ordering more often and less amounts, so you're always getting fresh oil.
Fresh.
Instead of buying, because we offer like the big 3-liter tin can.
Yeah.
And it's a lot for some people. For others, it's not that much. Like we go through one of those a week in our house. But we use it for almost everything. So if you're not going to be able to use what you bought in the next 6 months, you probably bought too much. And I would tell any one of our customers, hey, buy less of it, and just more often.
I love that. Yep. So from the time you open it, you've got 6 months.
Mm-hmm.
We've already talked about it being in a cool, dark place. Obviously, keep the lid on it tight.
Oh, yeah, definitely.
Yeah. What else? It's better. I know that it's better to not heat it, right? Like putting it on your food right out of the can or right out of the bottle is where you're insured to have the most nutrition.
Definitely. Yeah, it's degraded with heat. We do cook with it though. I mean, it's,
yeah, of course.
For
yeah.
generations, that's all we had really was olive oil and animal fats.
And it has a fairly high smoke point.
It does.
Olive oil is one of those oils that can withstand some heat, but it's true. You never, even when you're cooking anything, you should turn the heat way, way up and keep the oil heating in it for long.
No, definitely.
Heat the pan and then add the oil.
Definitely.
Yep. That's great. What else am I looking for on a label?
So on that bottle, well, the first thing I always, and we talked about this before, but I always tell people if I have the knowledge that I do, and I don't own an olive oil company, what am I looking for? The first and foremost thing is it organic? And that's on the front.
It says organic and non-GMO.
Yes, because well, non-GMO, we put that on there because it is a very recognized logo and verification process that is done with non-GMO verified. That being said, all of our olive trees are way older than genetic modification.
Yes, right.
I don't think we have an olive tree that's under 50 years old.
But it's worth mentioning because you're not genetically modifying your olives. Sure,
yeah, and I'm sure that's coming down the road from somebody somewhere in the world is going to be doing it.
How could it not have been done by now? Because I would imagine the race to the juiciest olive, right? Because you get more yield.
Yeah, I mean, the thing is, again, there's a whole quality issue, and I could talk to you for hours about that. Even how often you water an olive tree will determine the quality of the olive oil. You don't want to overwater it.
I love that.
So, and it also starts from like when you plant an olive tree, like if you water it a lot coming up, it will fruit faster, but it's always going to require that same amount of water. So it's like an endless cycle of kind of immediate gratification.
Right. So your family may not hug every bottle, but they're definitely hugging every tree.
Oh yeah, the trees.
I feel good about that.
Yeah, so that bottle right there, the average tree makes that's the 500 milliliter, correct?
Yep. Yes,
right, so
500 milliliter. So what is that? Oh my God, 16 ounces. No.
Yep. So that a single tree will make about 6 to 8 of those bottles once a year.
Wow.
So that's really, right.
One tree only makes 6 to 8 of these a year.
Yep.
Oh, I suddenly feel so special.
I know. That's why I really try to get across to people. So when you're buying, if you buy the bigger can of olive oil, that's literally an entire tree you just bought.
Wow.
So when I'm
it's a finite number of cans or bottles that you can make.
Yeah, definitely.
It's amazing.
And then, so with the organic though, that's the first thing I look for because, how we were talking about how you treat your food. Right. I don't want to be eating food that had pesticides sprayed on it for an entire year.
And it's not heated, right?
Exactly.
So again, this is cold. Olives are harvested and then they're mashed and pressed in a cool environment.
Exactly.
So whatever's sprayed on your tree 100%. Is 100% in your olive oil.
Totally. So that's really it's the first thing we look for. Actually the entire valley where our olive oil comes from is organic. Nobody is allowed to use pesticides in that entire area for quite a big area. Because that's another problem you might get in some regions is, okay, my farm's organic and we don't use pesticides, but the guy down the street is spraying his orange trees and the pesticides don't see a border. The wind and the water are going to take them over to you. So those are really what I would look for. The next thing after that is the date that it was produced.
Yep.
So most olive oils bottles will not have a production date or a harvest date on them. And the reason is because a lot of big corporations
put my glasses on.
Yeah, it's probably on the top on that one, on the.
Yep. Oh, on the lid.
Yeah.
No,
you're on the bottle. I'm sorry. I thought you were.
I got a bottle on this one.
It's on the back.
2020 February.
Yep, so that's
oh my gosh! This year of February.
That's
just
all
a few months ago.
We only.
That's incredible.
I mean, the biggest issue with the production date though, and why it's missing on a lot of bottles is because a lot of large corporations that don't produce enough for what they export is they'll buy, they could buy olive oil from Spain, or I'm just not picking on Spain, just a random country, or Tunisia, wherever, it's a lot cheaper to buy last year's harvest. Because if a company doesn't sell all their olive oil, they store it. So they can sell it a year from now. It's not bad. It's just not as good. So now you've got
different. Bad. It's just not as good.
Yeah. So now you've got all these different harvests of olive oil getting put into a bottle, and we don't know how old it is. So before it even starts a distribution process to America, we don't know how old it is, really. You might have a 2-year-old oil in there. You might have 6-month oil. It's all different. So that's really why a lot of times you'll see that production or harvest date missing on the bottle.
So here's what I think is fantastic. First of all, your knowledge, obviously, it's your family's business, but has been invaluable, because there are so many myths that even as a nutritionist for decades, I've been recommending different things to people, must save first cold press and throw it out after 2 months and things like that, where you've really kind of shed some light on this for me. But the other thing that I think is fantastic, and this is just a testament to your family and your dedication to really the art of healthy food and olive oil, is that the Kasandrinos Olive Oil Company is offering everyone a 50% discount on your first order, which I think is incredible and very, very generous, just to give everyone an opportunity to try taste the difference between a super fresh, well cared for olive oil. I think that's fantastic. So if you go to the show notes in evolvingageless.com or look below, you'll see a link that will take you to that offer. Tony, that's just so generous of you and your family and your business. It's so great. But I just think it's wonderful that everyone have the opportunity to see a difference and understand the difference in their olive oil versus what we've always been using.
Definitely. Yeah. I always tell people compare it with whatever's in your kitchen.
Yeah, I love that. I love it. And it has, if you like a peppery flavor, it has a wonderful, it's fruity in the beginning and finishes really peppery. I love it. It's so good. All right. Well, how is that? This was so much information. I know it's a lot. And Tony, thank you so much for joining us today.
No problem.
Helpful. And again, everything we do on Evolving Ageless is just showing that small changes, you don't have to make radical changes in your life to have a radical healthy outcome. You can make small changes. And if it's things like just the way getting a little more sleep or getting a little extra exercise or eating healthier or finding yourself an organic olive oil so that you're not bringing pesticides into your food. Any one of those things starts the process of evolving ageless. And I'm so excited that you were able to join us here today. You're so knowledgeable. Thanks again. And everyone, I'm here every week, same time, same channel. I'll be back next week with another expert that's going to help us evolve ageless.